What do you mean I wasn't supposed to eat the whole bag? Yeah, no, I ate every single one of them. Am I gonna be okay? Hi, I'm Gruffus. Welcome to Puppet Tabletop. And today we are gonna be taking a look at Nova Era. Okay, but like how long before they kick in? While civilization building board games aren't necessarily a new idea, there does seem to have been a lot of releases recently in that genre. It seems like everyone and their mother has a new take on the genre every few months. Well, CMON is here with their most recent crack at it, and it's called Nova Era. Nova Era can play 2 to 4 players and sees each player taking on the stress-free, relaxing role of overseeing a civilization. You'll be guiding your civilization across 3 eras of technological development, all the while hunting for that one resource that every civilization needs to prosper. Victory points. Sounds like a fun job, right? I mean, what could go wrong? Well, actually a lot could go wrong, but you don't need to worry about that right now. All you need to worry about is how you are going to pick your civilization up out of the dirt and usher in a golden era of prosperity. And this is going to be done primarily through developing technology. All of these technology cards are really the heart and soul of Nova Era. They can help you gain resources, provide passive benefits, or hinder your opponents. At the beginning of the game, you'll be given a hand of starting technology cards. Additionally, at the beginning of each era, you're going to lay out a shared display of available technology cards from a deck specific to the current era. Oh, but Gruffus, how do I build these technology cards? Well, you're going to need to spend dice to do that. Each era in the game is played over 3 rounds. At the beginning of every round, you'll be drawing dice from this handy-dandy little baggie and placing them in sets of 3. You're going to do this until you have a number of sets equal to the number of players plus 1. So in a 2-player game, you'll be setting up 3 sets of dice. Then every player is going to take turns selecting one of these sets of dice. But you do need to be careful when you select your dice. That's because for every number your combined dice value exceeds 10, you're going to need to increase your civilization's unrest tracker. Too much unrest can mean that you're about to have one hell of a bad time, so make sure you're choosing your dice carefully. And these dice come in 5 colors: blue, green, red, yellow, and black. Each dice color corresponds to a specific resource in the game. Blue represents the knowledge resource, green represents the welfare resource, red represents the military resource, and yellow represents economic resources. Black is special, so we'll get into that one in a minute. On your turn, you'll be spending your dice to take actions. There's a bunch of different actions you can take, but most of the time you're going to be taking the same 2 actions. The first is going to be to develop a technology. You do this by spending one of your dice and selecting a card from either your hand or the bottom row of the shared technology display. Then spend the resources listed in the upper left of the card. If there are multiple resource types listed, you only need to pay the cost of one of those resources, so it's up to you which one. The cool part about this is that if you spend a dice to develop a technology, and the dice is the same color as the resource cost, you can discount the price of that technology by the number on the dice. So say you're trying to build a 4-cost military technology, and you have a red dice worth 3. Then you only need to pay 1 military resource from your supply. If the dice value was 4 or higher, then you wouldn't need to spend any of your own resources because the dice is now covering the entire cost. Then, once you develop the technology, you can place it in front of your player board in the column corresponding to the resources that you paid to develop it. The second action that you're going to be taking a lot is just going to be getting some good old-fashioned resources. To do this, just spend a dice and gain the corresponding resources based on the dice color and value. For example, you can spend a yellow dice of value 6 to gain 6 economic resources. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Now let's get to those black dice. Instead of corresponding to a specific resource type, black dice are actually used for recruiting powerful figures to your civilization. Every era, you're not only going to be setting up a new technology display, but you will also be bringing out a handful of famous historical figures known as personalities. These guys and gals are going to be making the victory points rain down on your humble little empire by giving you either immediate points or end-of-era scoring conditions that you can aim for. There's just one problem with the personalities, though. They don't give a crap about your civilization's resources. Instead, they can only be purchased using black dice. To recruit them, you need to be able to pay their entire cost with the value of your black dice. If you don't have a high enough value on your black dice to afford the personality that you want, well, it looks like it's time to live dangerously. That's because you can pay the remaining amount by increasing your civilization's unrest. No, look at me. Look at me. You gotta be careful about that unrest tracker, okay? It's like dancing with the devil. The upside, though, is that if you ever overpay for a personality with the value of your black dice, you get to lower the unrest by the extra amount that you just paid. So, that's, nice, I guess. The last thing that you're gonna need to worry about each round is the disaster tracker. This thing keeps track of all of the impending calamities that could befall everybody's civilization. Maybe you get invaded by barbarians or a hostile neighboring state. Maybe your people just collectively decide to become a bunch of dum-dums and reject science in the pursuit of knowledge. Or worst of all, maybe you fall into a dark age. Don't do that. Falling into a dark age just makes the game less fun for everybody, and yeah, just don't do that. Anyways, remember those 3 dice that nobody wanted when everybody was picking their sets of dice? Well, those dice took it personally, and now they're out for blood. Each of the dice that were not selected causes the disaster corresponding to their color to advance a number of spaces based on the dice value. Reach 10 and it's Disaster City, population U, bro. Usually this consists of every player damaging one of their cards by flipping it upside down and making it useless until it's repaired with a future action. Okay, that's a lot of rules. Okay, we're almost done. Okay, where was I? Alright, so after you've checked for disasters, then everybody's gonna check to see if any of their technologies they developed produces any new resources. And then it's on to the next round. You repeat these steps until the end of the 3rd round when the era ends. Then you handle end of era scoring. You'll gain victory points equal to the number of different color technologies you built, as well as points for having the most of a color. You'll also gain any end of round scoring from your personalities. And with that, you set up a new technology display and new personalities for the next era. The last thing worth mentioning is that in between eras, everybody checks their cards for these evolution indicators on the technology that they've developed, and if you have one, you take the listed technology card from a side deck and start the next era with that card in your hand. This represents your civilization having a higher likelihood to advance that type of technology in the future. On the other hand, though, as you go through eras 2 and 3, you'll notice 2 different types of cards introduced to the game. One of which is territories, but we don't really need to go into that, they function very similarly to technology. The other one is going to be technology cards that have an obsolescence indicator on it. If a card with one of these indicators is played, then the card listed next to the indicator gets moved to the past, which is basically just a fancy discard pile, of whichever player owned that technology. This is to demonstrate that certain technologies will just become obsolete over time. So there's a lot more nuance and detail to the game, but for the most part, this is everything that you would need to have a solid understanding of how Nova Era works. So, what did I like about Nova Era? Well, there's a few things that I liked about it. One of the things that Nova Era does incredibly well is making every decision feel like it has an immediate impact on the rest of the game. From what dice you choose to draft, to what dice you choose not to draft, to what resources you're choosing to spend, to what cards you want to aim for, to what the ramifications of building those cards are. There's so much to consider with every decision that you make, but it does a really good job of hiding that complexity pretty well. You never really get analysis paralysis, but you also do feel like you're making big brain moves and taking calculated risks with every decision. And I really love it when games make me feel that way. I also really did enjoy the looming threat of this here disaster tracker. It not only adds more weight to every decision you make as you try to duck and dodge all of these impending disasters, but it also creates this weird collective sense of responsibility amongst all the players. If a disaster goes off, it's going to affect everybody. So seeing everybody kind of collectively work together to prevent these disasters is pretty interesting considering that it's a competitive game. Sometimes stopping a disaster requires you to make a decision that's going to benefit not just you, but also the player to your side. It adds another layer of player interaction and depth that really elevates the game beyond just your standard competitive engine builder and hunt for victory points. Also, let me just say that for a Civilization game, Nova Era plays extremely snappy. The first playthrough took us a while as we were all getting familiar with the rules, but once we moved on to Game 2 and Game 3, the games were flying by in just around 40 minutes, which is pretty impressive for a game in this genre. Also, let me just gush about this art for a second. I'm gonna butcher their name, but Agnes Rapoche did an absolutely stellar job on the art in this game. Every card is unique, beautifully colored, and just so detailed. They absolutely knocked it out of the park on this one. Lastly, I gotta say that the built-in storage solution in this box is just absolutely... It has labeled holders for all the cards, and it's just a breeze to store. Whoever designed the box inlay, you're a hero to all mankind. Thank you for your service. You deserve like an award or at least like a pat on the shoulder or something. So what did I not like? Well, there's a few things. First, there are some cards in the game that don't necessarily scale that well at lower player counts. There are cards that have high costs but impact every opponent. However, if you're at lower player counts, those cards lose their value substantially. It's not a common issue, but you'll see it probably pop up once or twice during your games. Also, I wasn't the biggest fan of how the evolution and obsolescence mechanic was implemented in this game. Whenever it's time to pass out new evolution cards, everybody has to dig through all their cards trying to find which ones evolve, and then everyone has to take turns going through an evolution deck hunting for the cards that they need. When you have a lot of cards on the table, it just adds a lot of unnecessary overhead. And obsolescence suffers from the same problem, but slightly worse. Because obsolescence happens during the actual round, someone will play a card that makes another card obsolete, and then everybody has to stop what they're doing, look through their hand, look through all the cards they've built, and flip over all the damaged cards, trying to hunt for that one card just in case somebody built it. The mechanic makes sense, but it does ruin the flow of an otherwise snappy game. I'm hesitant to mention this next one because the game is just so reasonably priced, but I gotta say the card quality in this game, not the best. While the art on it is absolutely fantastic, it just feels like the cards themselves are a little bit low quality. I'm always worried that I'm going to damage them when shuffling them, and they just don't feel very sturdy. The last issue that I had with the game had to do with the player aids that they provide. The game can be a bit overwhelming when you're first learning the rules, and especially during your first playthrough. As a result, this is one of those games that really could benefit from some detailed player aids. But for some reason, they decided to include player aids in this game, but only 2 of them, which is crazy considering that the game plays up to 4 players. It just seems like a bizarre oversight to me. Not to mention, learning all of the actions in this game is probably the hardest part, and the fact that they're not listed on the player aids is just kind of a mystery to me. And I think that impact would have been lessened if they had just some more detailed player aids and 4 of them instead of 2. And for the solo mode review, please welcome our resident solo gamer, Mortimer. Hi. So how did you like the solo mode? There isn't a solo mode. Thank you for your time, Mortimer. Then why did you even ask me? I said thank you for your time. So, what are my final thoughts on Nova Era? Well, honestly, I'm glad I purchased it. The game is really well priced for the experience you get in the box, and I really did enjoy my playthroughs of it. It'll definitely be staying in my collection. That being said, there are a lot of similar games out there, so I would really only recommend this game to people that are interested in the genre, enjoy engine building, and don't really have a similar game in their collection already. It's a pretty solid game. And I think that's going to do it for this one. Thanks for watching, and remember to shop at your local board game shop if you can. See you next time. Okay, yeah, I think they started kicking in.